Wouldn't it be amazing to carry around a toolkit of support with different tools ready to pick out and help you through those difficult moments raising neurodivergent kids? Kate Steer studied psychology and education before teaching in schools for 15 years. Today, she's a neurodivergent family coach and education consultant and has a huge depth of understanding and knowledge both through her own work and from home educating her neurodivergent son. Kate is passionate about helping parents support and better understand their kids and to help us feel empowered to advocate for them. Kate helps us to see from the child's perspective and the why underneath behaviours or challenges and see it through a neurodivergent lens. Kate's coaching is a combination of years of both professional and personal experience, and you can find out more on Kate's Instagram at nurturedneurokids and online at nurturedneurokids.com. 3 things you'll learn in this episode are the Meltdown mantra, why you should talk to your child's nervous system to co-regulate it when they're having a meltdown, making the unfamiliar feel familiar, and you are your child's expert, how you best advocate for your child at school. So welcome to the podcast, Kate. Kate, welcome to the podcast. We are finally sat opposite each other in the same room. We've had various conversations over Zoom, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
We have spoken about all sorts of things. So to have you here and to be able to spread your wisdom with people listening is really special. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So I normally start by asking my guests just to tell the listeners a little bit about you.
I started out doing psychology at university. I've always been interested in the why and people's brains and why things happen. And I did that, and then I went into teaching for many, many years. And always, I guess, was always the one who was looking after the children who found school a bit difficult and was always given, I guess, the more challenging classes. But then slowly I started to enjoy teaching less and less and decided that wasn't the path I wanted to continue with. I then had my son, and I now home educate and work as a neurodivergent family coach, supporting lots of families, and I guess using everything that I've learnt right from the beginning when I was doing my degree and I was working with autistic children then at the time as well. Everything through teaching and parenting and everything I've learnt from all the families I've worked with now, and I guess has, brought me to this space and is Nurtured Neurokids, really.
We decided together that we thought it would be great to give people a toolkit.
Yeah.
Something they can really take away from this episode where they have practical solutions. And I know these are things that you're talking with your families that you're coaching on your workshops. And so I thought you would be a great person to kind of provide this, especially I think as we're going into the summer holidays, which can be a particularly challenging time for many families. And when I put a question out to ask people if they could share what they really want the support with, the thing that kept coming back the most was about meltdowns.
Yes.
So I thought we could maybe dive into meltdowns first and talk about the, as you say, the why. Why has the meltdown happened? I guess meltdowns have they're a bit like a story, aren't they?
Yeah,
the start,
that's
the middle,
the end. That's almost the end. It's not quite the end. I think people think it's the end, but it's near the it's near the end of the story, but not quite. But yes, I guess there's a huge chunk of the story before that, and that's a huge part of understanding your child. And I guess that is predominantly what I help families to do, is to better understand their child and how they might be experiencing the world. And until we know that, it's really hard to understand why these things are happening for our child. And another child might not be having a meltdown in that situation or find that situation dysregulating. So we definitely need to understand why, and we need to know, I guess, what it is our children can manage in their environment. It's always about the environment. It's always about the environment and how they experience that. So it might be the sensory triggers in the environment that we need to learn. What are the things that our children are triggered by? Is it lighting? Is it what they're wearing? Is it the temperature? Is it the noise? Is it the smells? And not to undervalue those things. I think sometimes when I've done workshops or, speaking to parents, sometimes we forget actually the importance of one thing can be hugely overwhelming for a child. And we might not necessarily realise that the ticking of a clock in a classroom can be enough to make that impossible for them to go into that room. I always like to give lots of examples to people. And I was working with a family whose son was really struggling to go into school. And after lots of investigating and working out, we narrowed it down to this one part of the day that was the most challenging for him. And it was a maths lesson. And I guess the assumption is it's about maths and it's about the learning. And actually it was nothing to do with that. He was in secondary school and actually quite liked maths, he said. But there were two things that were making it impossible for him. And it was the ticking of the clock in that room that maybe none of the other children had noticed. And for him, every single day, that was a massive issue for him, was hugely dysregulating. And also maths was just before lunchtime and the classroom was above the school canteen. And so he had all the smells from that coming into the classroom. And those two sensory triggers were enough for him to not want to go to school, to experience that every single day. And I think there's this idea that the more we experience something, the easier it gets. And that's not necessarily true for neurodivergent children or adults. But if it's a sensory trigger, it might not be something we habituate to and that we get used to. It has the same effect on us as the very first time. So I think it's understanding all that and understanding our child's capacity to cope, and that capacity is fluctuating. So what our child can manage one day is not the same as what they could manage the next day.
And that can unsettle us, can't it? Because
absolutely.
You think, hang on, we managed that.
Yeah. Or they ate that yesterday and they can't eat it today. Parents often say, I don't know why they had that yesterday. Or because their capacity was different to manage that yesterday. And maybe they could have that bowl of pasta yesterday. But today, their capacity is an all-time low and all they can manage is toast or all they can manage is crackers because they cannot sensory-wise tolerate anything else. They just need their safe food. And when we have a greater capacity to manage things, maybe they'll try some fruit they've never tried, anything like that. It all comes down to capacity and how we as parents can help our children. I guess when they're younger, we are sort of managing their capacity, and then we teach them as they get older how we can make the environment easier for them so that we're keeping their capacity as high as possible. And I guess meltdowns are a sign that your child has zero capacity left. It is sort of an understanding that physiologically and psychologically your body is overwhelmed and you're not able to tolerate anything else in that moment. And I know they often get labelled as tantrums or children manipulating a situation, and I definitely don't understand them as that at all. And we need to see it as a reflection of our child's capacity to cope in that moment. That's what it is. It's a reflection of their nervous system and how they are coping right then in that moment. And it doesn't mean that's the thing before that is the thing that triggered the meltdown, but it's how they're feeling off the back of whatever else has happened. And maybe that's over the course of 2 days. Maybe it's something that happened in the last half an hour. That is kind of the sign that your child has no capacity left to cope in that moment.
And sometimes as a parent, I think you are often juggling a few things at once. It's very, very difficult to give your sole attention and focus 24/7.
Yeah.
And sometimes we miss things.
Of course.
And actually, as a mum, I often feel, I heard that boiling over, something happening, whether it was, siblings, arguing because they both want to play with the same scooter. And you can feel the tension rising and you go in and then you're trying to manage two very, very different brains that are processing things in different ways.
Yeah.
And the meltdowns it's going to hit.
Yeah.
But you're also obviously trying to balance the need of both children.
Yeah.
And it usually happens for me when I'm trying to get dinner ready or, I am literally the person that is the octopus that's trying to do everything all at once. I think that's the moment where I would like the advice of almost when you can't prevent the meltdown, because sometimes we just can't.
Yeah.
We don't have the capacity to do it. So when that meltdown, when that volcano has erupted, what should we do?
Firstly, I think we definitely shouldn't be scared of meltdowns. I think we need to understand that our children, our neurodivergent children, will always be dysregulated by life because they have much more sensitive nervous systems. They process things at a much deeper level. So life is really overwhelming for them. And as much as we can make accommodations and do the best job we can, they always will be dysregulated by something, as we all are. All of our nervous systems are dysregulated. So I think it helps when parents accept that, but it's the degree of that. So it's the intensity of that dysregulation and it's the frequency. And that's, I guess, what I do is, okay, well, let's try and work on that. Let's work on the intensity of the dysregulation and the frequency. So in the moment when that happens, I guess it's difficult. It's different if there's someone else involved in terms of breaking up a situation or a sibling situation. A meltdown isn't just dysregulation. So your child can be angry and your child can be protesting about something. But I guess that's dysregulation. And sometimes people see dysregulation as a meltdown. And actually that's just your child being angry or frustrated, and after 5 minutes of screaming at their brother or sister, they're okay. So that's not necessarily a meltdown because they still had some capacity to manage at that point. They still might have been able to hear you or hear something you were saying. In a meltdown, I guess it's at the point where they're beyond that. So their thinking part of their brain is not activated. And for some children, that lasts an hour and a half. The best thing we can do when you're in a full-blown meltdown situation is to just hold our child's emotions as best we can at that point, because that isn't the point that we can reason them out of that. That isn't the goal of it. The goal is to, I guess, show our children we can hold your big emotions. And they've got to the point where they can't hold that anymore. They can't hold all that big stuff and it's just totally overwhelmed them. And I'm your safe person, so I absolutely can hold that for you. And yes, to whoever's listening to this, that is hard. And we both know that's hard. And I'm not here, I'm doing this too. So I get that that's a really hard thing. We hold their emotions. We say very little. The least you can say is the better. Because what you need to do is you need to communicate to that your child's nervous system, not to their brain. You're talking to their nervous system at that point. And so you need that nervous system to feel safe, because in that moment, it's in fight or flight. So it's highly reactive. It's kind of at the, that might be hitting and kicking. They're properly in fight or flight. Cortisol is just running wild. So you need to help their nervous system to feel safe. That's the easiest way, I guess, for a meltdown to be less intense. And so you could say, I work with the families I do and we create a mantra. If you have a meltdown mantra, if you know what you're going to say in the moment, it makes it easier for parents to hold their calm as well, because you know what you're going to do. And you think, it's okay because I've got this. I know what I'm going to say. I know how I'm going to manage it. And you can say whatever you want to, but I like to say, I am here, you are safe. And that's all you need to say. Sometimes we think about saying I love you, but that can feel like a lot of pressure for some children. So they maybe hold the love bit until nearer the end. And just keep saying that to them. I'm here, you are safe. And you might then need to, hold the other child, remove the other child. But you don't need to get into the don't do this, because you're just communicating to their nervous system at the moment. And your job in that moment is to stay as calm as you can. And if you have a mantra that you can repeat, I think it really helps our own nervous system as well to kind of stay in that sort of, I can do this. Give yourself a pep talk in your head. You've got this, Kate. You know, you can do this. I think that can help in the moment of when it feels very triggering for us as well.
So definitely what I have taken to put in my toolkit there is my Meltdown mantra.
Yeah, create one.
And talking to the nervous system. I think even that just flips the energy of what we're doing here. Because to me, if I'm talking to someone's nervous system, I want to comfort, I want to reassure. So you're not looking at the behaviour then, you're looking at somebody's nervous system. So I think that's a brilliant takeaway. Something we were talking about was the difference between meltdowns and dysregulation. And regulation came up quite a bit as well when people were commenting on my post. Dysregulation of that for their children, but also how to regulate themselves for their kids. So can we have a little think about that big topic, which is also an episode in itself?
I was going to say, we're going to do another series, aren't we? I think actually some of the things that we can do for our children is actually we're doing it for ourselves. So when we are parenting proactively, which is what I always like to kind of work with families, and I put loads on my Instagram about this. When we parent proactively, what we're doing is we're kind of preparing for things. So we're not just preparing our children, we're also preparing ourselves. So we're thinking, okay, we've got a podcast to come to in London. How can I best prepare for that? Or we're going to this family event, and what might my child feel what might they experience that's difficult for them, that's tricky? And what can we do in the lead up to that to be prepared? So are those difficult conversations I need to have as the parent in advance with whoever we might be meeting? Is it accommodations that I need to pack in my bag? What are all the things, sensory tools I might need to take? And I think when we start to parent from that position, it helps us firstly to perhaps remove some of the things that our children will find dysregulating, therefore will trigger our nervous system to feel dysregulated, especially if we then in the moment think, should have done that. And the thing is, we can't obviously account for everything, but it's all about this confidence in parenting. And I love it when parents message me and they say, you'd be so proud of me, Kate, because that's what it is. And I feel quite emotional, but, that's what I want parents to feel confident in what they do. And I think when we prepare for things, it allows us to feel confident because we think, okay, I know how I'm going to manage that. And yes, they might get dysregulated by that, but I've got all these tools in place. And when we talk through that, I guess, in our body, that has a really regulating sort of effect on us as well, that sort of forward planning in everything. It's like if we turn up to a business meeting late and we hadn't, done our notes or whatever, that would feel really dysregulating for us. So I think it's that same thing applies for parenting. It's not easy to parent proactively, but it can be more regulating for us as well as our children because there's a more preparedness about things. It makes, I guess, the start of whatever we're doing can be calmer. And it allows us to respond to a situation rather than react. And I think our nervous system's being dysregulated is us reacting. And when we react, sometimes we might do or say things we hadn't intended to. If we know our child's going to be dysregulated by that, and we think, okay, they are probably going to find tomorrow impossible because it's 30 degrees and they've got to be in the playground. I know they're going to really struggle. So I'm going to expect them at pick-up time to be completely dysregulated, maybe have a meltdown in the playground. I've already planned that. I'm going to take a nice lolly. I've got this in the car. We're going to go straight home. They can watch their iPad in the car. I've got the paddling pool set up. If we know that that is likely to happen, and it might not, but if we think that it might, I guess it regulates us by knowing I am going to expect them to kind of maybe chuck their bag down and, scream at me. I think that can help regulate us by, I guess, that forward thought of what's likely to happen.
Preparation.
Yeah.
So with preparation, what sort of thing, like I'm envisaging or something I use is, because often, however much I try to plan, there might be a reason why I can't pick up that ice lolly or I can't. So I have like a pouch, like a bag with some sensory toys.
Sensory kit.
Yeah, like a sensory kit.
That's what I talk about,
choose, and I also in there have an aromatherapy, ball.
Those little...
Yeah, so I think that's, for me, that's been kind of a bit of a survival kit to have that
It's a sensory
available.
kit for everyone as well. I have fidgets that I have, in the house, as well as they're for everyone to use. But those things keep me regulated. I might use loop earpods in the house. I'm sure there's others available. But
that was revelation, really, actually. Putting those in.
Yeah. Drown out the noise for yourself as well. I think it's those things of, maybe they're the things we're doing for our child. And I guess that's what I mean by the preparedness is, if we're doing it for them, what of those might I need as well? My bag is full of fidgets. So actually, are any of those good for me? I've been, using fidgets on the train journey here as well.
Yeah. So mirroring.
Absolutely.
Regulation.
If they're taking an Epsom salt bath, have an Epsom salt bath. If we're saying, those of you who know me, I talk about Epsom salt baths all the time. But if they're regulating for our children, then is there an opportunity for us to have one? And for those of us who might not have the time for a bath, can you have a foot bath? Can you get a bowl out while you're watching television? Or, can you allow yourself those regulatory tools that you're learning for your children? How can you apply that for yourself? If we know that nature and going outside is so regulating for our children, I mean, it is just the best. Can we do that for ourselves? And I think sometimes I am now at the stage where I can say to my child, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. Maybe we're in a room of lots of toys and it's just, we've been in this space for too long. I need to go for a walk. And if I feel like if I don't, perhaps my body might feel quite grumpy. So let's go outside for a bit. So I think it's that advocating for yourself as well. If you start to know how your body feels better, the things that feel better. And if going outside is not possible, can you get a little walking pad inside? Or, the things that top up your body as well. So I think as we learn to do that, I didn't used to do that for myself. I didn't used to think about myself like I do now. And I think doing that for my child has definitely taught me how to do that for myself.
Yeah, it's very true. The baths
Yeah.
have been a saviour.
Yeah.
And often we put on an audio book and can spend quite a long time.
Yeah.
It's an actual activity.
It's an actual activity. A good hour and a half is spent in our house in an Epsom salt bath. So that, that is a great tool for anyone who hasn't yet discovered that. Post-school, dysregulation, or on a hot day, or at any point, pre or post kind of a big event that's happening. Get your child in an Epsom salt bath for as long as they're happy to play in there, because it's not just the Epsom salts. You're actually, it's sensory play. They're in water. Water's hugely regulating. So we're not just playing with water in a tray. We're actually in it and we're splashing. And even just the noise of water is regulating. Having water on our skin for some children is very regulating. I know others who love doing that in a shower and they play at the bottom of the shower. And so absolutely, fully embrace those things.
And one of the things I have found helpful after school have been, you mentioned it, I make an ice foot bath.
Yeah.
And just put it down, whilst they're watching something. And even ice cubes, anything
ice.
like that is just, and especially in this hot weather.
Yeah.
So I think we're talking about with regulation for ourselves, it's not forgetting ourselves. What can we do at the same time as our children to help us all regulate? And what can we prepare in advance?
I think, and it's not always easy. I know that. And I know time is really short for some people. But even if it's just a few minutes here and there, it will help your nervous system to stay more regulated, to help your child's nervous system. If we're co-regulating with our children, which many of us are doing a lot, we absolutely have to try where we can to, just check in with ours to help.
I'm going to steer off in a different direction now
Okay.
to school.
Yeah.
And and how we can advocate for our kids at school. And again, I think it's when we are depleted on a day-to-day basis. And I think our nervous systems have either gone into shutdown, or we're in fight or flight, or we're kind of not quite feeling strong. You know, we might be feeling really quite vulnerable, and there might be a lot of different opinions coming our way. But somewhere inside us, we know ultimately what is the right thing for our children. But then we've got to go and try and advocate for them at the school. What do you say to parents that come to you and ask you this question?
I think one of the hardest things about advocating in school is often the last time we were in school, in a school building, was when we were children. And, you know, that sort of compliance thing is in our bones of you mustn't talk back to a head teacher or, you know, question what they're saying. And if they tell me that my child is fine or that I can't possibly do that, we don't do that in this school, it's really hard to go back and say, actually, no, that's not good enough.
Meet them as an adult.
Yes.
Even because
absolutely.
they're a Mr. or a Mrs. as well. It kind of puts that authority.
Exactly.
And also, I guess we are taught, aren't we, to respect.
We're from, definitely a generation of seeing adults in a different way, I guess, to how perhaps we're talking to our children about respect and mutual respect. But I think that is very, very hard for parents. And I think there can be a lot of people are questioning your reality. And I think that's the thing, is just hold on to the fact that you are your child's expert. You know, they might be an expert in teaching, but you are an expert in your child. So don't allow somebody else to tell you about your child. You know your child. You know, you're their advocate. And we can't allow our children's reality and your reality to be silenced. And I'm so impassioned about this, you know, that I understand that's not difficult. And you're not going in to have an argument. You're not going in to be confrontational. But if you're not friends with that teacher, then that's okay. You know, the teacher's not going to punish your child because you went in and had a tricky meeting. And I know parents are often really reluctant to be that parent, to be labelled as potentially a tricky parent or an awkward parent. But, you know,
that now makes sense why the child is.
Yes.
You know,
I can see it now.
Yeah.
And maybe I had those moments as well teaching, but I think no one else is going to advocate for your child. And we cannot expect children to go in and do it for themselves, you know, in a setting of 29 other children, and maybe a setting where they don't feel safe or understood or seen. So if we don't say it, no one else will. Once you've done it once, it gets easier. But absolutely where that, you know, that parent, see it, flip it, reframe that, and absolutely see it as a badge of honour, because you put that parent on a badge, you wear it like a rosette, or you imagine that on your, you know, your rosette says, you know, I'm doing this for my child. This is for my child. And if you go into school and see that as, this is an honour to come in and fight for my child, not fight as in aggressively, but I hope that can help parents to feel empowered that it's absolutely okay to do something different. It's okay to ask for something different. In terms of things you can ask for, try and think of things that don't have any money attached, is where I always start. You know, there's absolutely tons of reasonable adjustments and accommodations that can be made with no monetary attachment. Schools don't advertise them. Parents often say, oh, but they didn't tell me about these. They're not going to, probably. And I'm not teacher bashing here at all, because I was one, but there are lots of things that can be done, and parents are told, no, that can't be done, or we can't do it for that one child, we have to do it for all of them. Okay, fine. So have fidgets out for every child, because to take them away from my child is discriminatory. It's, you know, it's disability discrimination, actually, or it's ableist. It's, you know, all of those things. But okay, have fidgets out for the whole class. They do that. In other countries, that is standard. You know, Australia, New Zealand, they have fidget boxes, or they have them on the tables, and any child can have a fidget. And the thing is, once you do these things, children get used to it, and it doesn't become exciting or novel, or, you know. And when I was teaching, I used to do brain and movement breaks all the time, and no one was silly or crazy, because we did it every day. I do it probably every 10 or 15 minutes. Everyone was used to it. So maybe they're a bit crazy at the start of the year, But then they just did it like anything else. And I can't believe, so many years later, this is still not happening in all these schools. So that's definitely another episode. But these are things you can definitely ask for. They're not difficult. And I just hope parents can either find someone else who's doing it, speak to someone who helps them to feel confident, and know that it's okay. It's not easy. When I say it's okay, I don't mean it's easy, but it is okay to ask for something different. It is okay to ask for your child to have their needs met. It absolutely is.
So the rosette is going in the toolkit.
Put it in your toolkit.
Ready to be pulled out. Something I talked about with you in the intro, and something that I just really love thinking about, is understanding the why. Mm-hmm. And even just starting to think about that is enough to reframe a lot of situations. When did it kind of become clear to you that you needed to start understanding the why?
Children are always seeking something, and the louder their behaviour gets, or I guess the greater their unmet need is, the louder they're going to ask for that, whether it's, and usually it's connection, but we need to kind of reframe how we are understanding that, because asking a child to sit on a naughty step or asking a child to think about what happened is not the way, they're never going to be able to do that anyway, most of the time, especially young children. They're not necessarily going to be able to communicate the why, because it would be impossible for them at 4, 5, 6 to actually know what's happening in their body. And so I think parents expect too much. Adults, expect too much of their children sometimes. So I guess in terms of just quickly adding in a toolkit, what can be really helpful language to trying to get under that why is the phrase too much. So I used to use this a lot when my son was really little. Does that feel too much? You tell me when that feels too much. And you don't actually then need to know what that specific is. That's something you work out maybe years later. But that can be a really good sense of they're overwhelmed, but they don't know why they're overwhelmed. And the more you do it, the more they can feel that earlier. This feels too much, or this isn't right for me, or this is too tricky. And then on the flip side, how can I make that easier? Or does this make it feel easier for you? Rather than it's bad or it's good or it's better. I don't like the better thing because it makes it feel like someone's poorly. Do you feel better? It's not necessarily about that. It's about, does this feel easier in your body? So I guess I'm really motivated by the why and understanding children's whys.
So would you say with children, perhaps younger children, would you go more to what it feels like in the body rather than how it feels kind of emotionally?
You can start talking about how tricky does this feel? Is it a little bit tricky? Or is it really tricky? So you can start with a scale of the trickiness in their body. Because I guess overwhelm is in our bodies, isn't it? It's our nervous systems being overwhelmed, or it's our brain being overwhelmed. So even if it's too much in our brain, then it's still kind of too much. So you can start the conversation off like that. And then later on, you might start to be able to talk about how does that feel in your brain at that moment.
And start to make the connection.
Yeah. And then they might say, that situation made me feel really frustrated. Or I felt very angry. Often it's I felt really sad. That made me feel sad. And I think all of those things is a huge part of emotional regulation. And we can't regulate our emotions. Firstly, we can't regulate an emotion we're not allowed to have. And we can't regulate emotions that we are not able to identify. So the first part always with younger children is to help them identify it. And if we do that as a feeling in our body, we all get that sense it doesn't feel right. We don't feel right, or we don't feel comfortable, or, I'm just really overwhelmed right now.
We found using that scale helpful, actually, from, sort of from 0 to 10.
Yeah.
Where are you feeling? And actually, it's quite useful when you are sort of targeting something as a gauge for them to visually see, oh, well, I was here, but now I feel a bit better and I'm here. But today I was a bit less again. And it's sort of,
That's that fluctuating capacity, isn't it? And for them to understand that, the goal is never to feel calm. The goal is not to be calm all the time. I guess the goal is for our peaks and troughs to be less peaky and trophy, and to just sort of ebb and flow a little bit like a slightly rough sea, but rather than a big storm. And that sliding scale, I guess, works beautifully. It probably isn't something you'd want to use in the moment, because to choose a number might be quite overwhelming. If you're in a situation and you saw your child tense up, or you felt them if you were holding them, and you might say, does this feel tricky right now? And how big does this feel? And they might say, it feels really big. Mm-hmm. Okay, I know to remove you from this situation now. Mm-hmm. Because they might be too young to say, I want to leave. Mm. That might come later, as in, I don't want to be here, or I'm ready to leave now. Mm. So I think then afterwards you could talk, when you're home and things. Do you know how that felt in the moment? Was it a 10? Or was it a 7? And I guess that helps us again, what was that situation?
Yeah. And I guess it's like, I think about birthday parties. Yeah. When your child, they really want to go. It's a really good friend of theirs. They like the activity, but it's also bordering on, that it is going to be a challenge for them. And they're kind of not able to really communicate with you that is what they need. Yeah. And then we're going back to sort of confidence in parenting to say, okay, I need to advocate in this moment. And that can be really difficult, because you're trying to work out, okay, what do I do here? Yeah. And that's often where I feel, God, I'm not an expert. What do I do? How do I manage this situation?
Well, you're doing yourself a disservice, because you are an expert in your children. So you do know what to do. I think we all know what to do. We're just sometimes not confident enough to ask for that, or to know how to do that in a group setting or a family setting or a dynamic that just feels like, I don't really know how to make that work. I guess you know your child and you know what they could manage. And that is part of our job, is to help manage what I call manage their exposure. It's not fair to put them in a situation that we know would be potentially traumatic for them. Now, a birthday party might not be traumatic for some children, but for another child, it really would. So first of all, it's absolutely knowing your child. Maybe they wouldn't know that the party started at 1, but you actually go at 2 and you tell them the party started at 2. But then they only have an hour of crazy rather than 2 hours of crazy. And you speak to the people who are organising it. Will the party bags and cake be done at the end? Because we might only come for the last 40 minutes or half an hour, or whatever that might be, an hour, so that your child still gets to go, but the exposure to the overwhelming situation is less. And I guess that helps them to manage that. I would always find out, I guess, the situation, what events there might be going on, or what activities. Maybe your child wants to watch the entertainer beforehand, so they've seen that already, so they'll know what tricks they might be doing, or what animals they might show, or whatever that is. Or if there's a bouncy castle there and your child's never been to one, can they go on a bouncy castle somewhere else first before they experience it for the first time in a really overwhelming situation? So there's that proactive parenting thing. And it's all about, I know we've talked about this before, making the unfamiliar feel familiar. So if there's going to be 100 unfamiliar aspects at a party, can you take any of those away? Or can you allow them to experience that first, even just a few of those, so that when they get there, it doesn't feel so overwhelming?
Actually, interestingly, you just bring that up, because I actually found that useful for all my children. Yeah. Because so often we just sort of expect them to know what's going to happen.
Totally, because we know.
We've done it, and we know. Gosh, there's so many things, Kate.
Is the toolkit filling up?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely filling up. And also all of these topics we're covering are an episode in themselves.
They are,
so I think you've done amazingly in articulating things into such concise forms. There's one last topic that I just want to talk about for today, and that is transitions. I think transitions are happening all the time for our kids. You know, we're about to transition into school holidays, or you're transitioning into a new class at school, or you are moving house, or you are simply trying to transition from one part of the day to the next. So how can we support through transitions?
I think a lot of what we've already talked about will help them. So I think if you foresee a transition coming, and it's interesting actually that from families, feedback I get from families, their understanding of transitions is often what you talked about in terms of moving house or the end of the school week or the end of the school term, which are monumental transitions for children, going on holiday. But there's also smaller transitions like getting dressed, going downstairs when we're upstairs, so transitions in the house, going out into the garden, having a great time in the garden and being asked to come back in the house and end your fun. All of those are transitions that can be equally as dysregulating. The best thing we can do for transitions is to make them easier, is to prepare for them and to prepare our children for them. So not to expect our children to just be able to manage that, and also not to have any forewarning of what that is. So, for example, you're going to get them to turn their screen off, the whatever they're on. If you shout from the kitchen, you've got 5 more minutes, you know, they might not have heard you because they're watching the television and they're totally absorbed. As we know, our kids get properly into that, hyper-focusing away. They have not heard you give that warning. So then when you come in after 5 minutes and it's not off, or you come in and say, okay, now it's time to switch off, they've had no warning. Absolutely, they're going to lose it because this is the thing that regulates them. And you've asked them to stop the thing that regulates them. Or a parent who I was working with switched on the Hoover without letting her child know. You know, she said, I've used the Hoover a million times. So it's just because you didn't prepare her for that transition, for that thing happening.
Or the hand dryers.
Yes. Oh, yes. Next time, tell her you're about to Hoover and see what happens. And she messaged me, like, nothing. She was totally fine. So I think one is that kind of preparing them for that. If it's a big transition, yes, lots of visual preparation of what that will look like. Another really good one, if it's a big transition, is what are the things that stay the same and what are the things that are different? And try to focus on all the things that stay the same. So if they're changing year group or you're going on holiday, what can you do to make the staying the same column? Write it down. So it's bigger, it's massive. Even if you sort of do the tiniest, we're going to walk past the same lamppost on that street, you know, really look at the details so that your child feels safer in the knowledge that actually a lot will stay the same. We're going on holiday, but we'll all be there together and we're going to take with us all your best toys, all your books. We're going to take, I always say this, take your pillowcase from home so that it smells of home when you go to sleep. It's not scratchy in a different fabric and smells of the hotel fabric softener. It smells of home. And so you're going to go to bed, you know, with your pillow and just take as much with you. Look at photographs of where you're going. I guess the more we can do that, and with school changing year groups with a new teacher, how many times can your child visit that new classroom before they're in it? You know, can they do little jobs back and forth to that room to get to know the teacher? Can they have any one-to-one time? Preparation is just the absolute kind of proactiveness of parenting that helps with transitions. And then in the moment, I guess what are the tools that help them through in that moment, whether it's something comforting from home, whether it's you, their safe person.
Kate, is there anything that you would like to offer to the listeners as their kind of, I don't know, the top layer of this toolkit that we've created today?
I think I just really want people to, one, know that it is hard. The things I'm talking about are really hard. So many of us face lots of judgment and criticism over what we're doing, but to just always bring it back to your child, you know your child, and to really trust that you know what you're doing for them. And it's okay to do something different. It's not an easy thing to do something different, but it's okay to do something different. And, you know, your child's needs, your child's mental health should always come above the opinions and the judgment of everyone else. And that's not easy. So I hope people listening have someone who can make them feel heard and who they can share, when it has gone well, that they can say, yeah, they managed to have their hair cut today, or they brushed their teeth okay today. We all need somebody to share those moments with. So I really hope that people can feel confident in that. And confidence comes the more we do it. It's okay to ask for things for our children. It's okay to set a boundary that we don't want to do things the way other people have, and that when you come into my house, this is how we do it. And I'm not asking you if you agree with that or you like it. Don't actually ask them that. But, this is my boundary, and you can set a boundary calmly and kindly. You can be a kind person and set a boundary. And not everyone will like that. That's not about you. So I know all that stuff is super hard. I think, yeah. Anyone in this world knows that's easier said than done, but just know there's loads of us doing it.
If there was one thing you could change for the future of our neurodivergent kids, what would it be?
I just wish other people would understand our world and to not give up their family or their friends. And hopefully, if anyone's listening to this who has a friend or family member whose children are neurodivergent, to just know that it's really hard for them, and our circle gets so much smaller, just to try and be more understanding and just don't go anywhere.
Thank you, Kate. That's it for this episode of Let's Talk Neurodivergent Kids. You can find out more about Kate by following her on Instagram @NurturedNeuroKids or by going to nurturedneurokids.com. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with anyone who might find it helpful. I'd also really love to hear from you. You can get in touch via email, that's hello@letstalkndkids.com, or message me on @letstalkndkids on Instagram. Thanks so much for listening, and please do join me next time on Let's Talk Neurodivergent Kids.